Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Spear and you're listening to the HorrorFam.com podcast. My guest today is one of our co-founders. Her name is Heather Landry, but you might know her better as Sandpaperdaisy. She runs Sandpaperdaisy art and she's at Sandpaperdaisy pretty much everywhere, Twitter, Instagram. She did all of the artwork on HorrorFam.com, our banner, our mascots, all that wonderful stuff. So you likely know her as an artist, even if you didn't know it. But today, we're talking to her about writing, because my gal Heather just finished her very first novel, The Cradle of the Worm, and I'm extremely excited to talk to you about it, and extremely excited to talk to her about it. So, how you doing?
I am doing really darn great. I'm kind of glad to have this off my back, because, I've been working on this darn thing since I was a kid in high school. I calculated up, and it's something like 25 years now.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. About time for a new dream.
Well, you have done something incredibly special for HorrorFam.com readers and listeners. You're offering the first edition of your book for free on HorrorFam.com.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, and why?
Well,
like, not that I don't appreciate it, but, why would you do such a crazy thing?
Because we are currently having a really darn crazy time. The situation that we're currently in, because right now, whenever Lauren's interviewing me, we're right dead smack in the middle of the COVID-19 epidemic in 2020. This time we're in is so weird that we are already basically living in some kind of dystopian sci-fi novel. Everybody I've known, no matter how much they like or dislike fantasy and sci-fi, has all, without exception, come up to me and remarked about how they felt like they were in a movie. So, obviously, everybody's feeling it, and everybody's kind of, most of them are kind of scared or upset, or at the very least, they're inconvenienced and annoyed, because many of them have been told to stay home. Nobody likes being told to do anything. So I really wanted to give the only thing that I could give to everybody in the world who is stuck at home on the internet, and that is my 25 years work on this novel. So here you go, folks. I hope I could cheer one or two of you up.
That's so awesome. Yeah, because I know so many people, my friends and even just random people, are like, do you have any book recommendations? I'm super bored and I'm not used to being at home, and they're all just crazy bored and looking for things to entertain themselves with. And you also created coloring book pages for horrorfam.com, which are also free. And so people have been doing like their adult coloring book pages, and now you've given them a novel to read, and I think that's just fantastic. And I feel terrible for everyone. We're a little bit more used to it because we're freelance writers and artists, and working at home is kind of our thing. But I feel so bad for the people who aren't used to that.
I know, same. Some of my friends are just losing their darn minds. 'Cause, yeah, they're used to, 9 to 5, and then you go home, and then you go out to eat, or, you do all these different things outside the home. Some people have almost their entire life outside of their home, and yeah, it's really just freaking them out.
Yeah, but your novel is over 200 pages, so that should keep them busy for a few hours at least.
I hope so. Yeah, it took me about a day or two to, I did the whole, read through the entire thing cover to cover right before I pulled the trigger on it, just to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it didn't take me too terribly long.
Yeah, and you were saying that it's, depending on the age group and their tolerance for gore, it should be okay for younger readers as well, yes?
Yeah, I would think that maybe 16, 17 and up. Because there's no erotic scenes where two people are into each other and having a sexual encounter. There's no hard language at all. It's just that there are several very violent, terrible things that happen because the book includes war, and I'm sure you're aware of some of the things that happen in war. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, so there's, I'll go ahead and, tell the readers that there's a very brief touching on, in the context of war, asexual assault. But again, it's something that's talked about as being a terrible thing that happened. It's not dwelt upon as something that, somebody should be titillated by. So as long as children, older teenagers are, aware that things like war happen and, people occasionally get killed or assaulted or whatever, and are okay with your, your basic level monster movie. I'm not talking like Hostel here. I'm just saying like, John Carpenter's The Thing or something like that, where there's creepy monsters, I think
Yeah.
they'd probably be okay with it.
I agree. Yeah, I think, don't read this as a bedtime story to your 5-year-old, but if your 16-year-old is sitting around wanting something to read, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, because I mean, even, The Hunger Games or whatever, again, it mentions like very unfortunate atrocities that happen just in passing, but it doesn't dwell lovingly on them.
Yes.
It's a very violent story, but you're not supposed to just be wallowing in it, basically.
Yeah, and I thought that was really great that you were able to, touch upon these horrifying aspects without
without it being the point.
Yeah.
There's still an actual fantasy story that's the point.
Right.
So, yeah.
And, well, I guess we should tell them a little bit. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it is a horror fantasy, and I don't know how much would you like to say beyond that.
I suppose I could talk a little bit about some of the themes in the book, or maybe some of the characters in the book, like a little bit. There's a lot in the book about being accepted and people forming their own families whenever perhaps they were not able to keep their original family with them for some reason. So there's a lot of people coming together and forming their own, sometimes unusual, but just as loving and valid families in the face of having to adapt and adjust to extraordinarily bad circumstances. There's a lot of that.
Hey, that sounds awfully familiar. That sounds quite a lot like what we're all going through right now, and with our horror family on the internet here.
True, yeah. There's a lot of people who, for whatever reason, are not accepted by the current society that they are in, but they are able to find their folks, their society, by putting themselves out there and just putting one foot in front of the other and going on. I mean, this is kind of silly, but one thing that really cheered me up really hardcore right when all this stuff went down, and unrelated, I had lost a family member and just all this other random stuff. I had to get gas one day on this wretched cold day, and I looked up at the marquee, and somebody had put, "When you're going through hell, keep going," up on that marquee. And it completely saved me on that particular day, and that's in my book. I mean, the book is all about how, okay, it's impossible, the world seems like it's crashing down upon your ears. Everything's wrong. Keep going.
I think that that's a wonderful message, especially with everything that... It's a wonderful message at any time, but especially right now. The fact that you were able to give that message out and put it out into the world at this time is great. I mean, it's terrible that we need that message more than ever now, but it's great that you were able to provide that to people, and for free.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, all of us need to make enough money to eat and all that, and take care of our families, and that's a valid thing to do, which we should all definitely do. And we should all try not to get taken advantage of course. But if there's something that you really want to do, that you just love, that you want everybody to have, if you can, I think it's so wonderful to be able to just give it to them. And that's the thing. I really do love, and I really do genuinely believe in this story. Because I had to believe in this story, because this story is basically me. I mean, it's 25 years of my life. And I believe in it from top to bottom, and I love it. And I thankfully am blessed enough that I can just give it to you guys. So that's genuinely what I wanted to do. I mean, obviously I'm going to have a nice, version that has... I'm a horror artist, first and foremost, so I'm going to have a big old fancy schmancy version with just gorgeous drawings in it, maps just everywhere, maps at the front of every darn chapter, big old map in the front, like, Lord of the Rings, all that. And I will definitely make that available for people to buy in paper and have a nice, luxurious, creamy paper copy right there. But the story, I wanted to just give people.
I think that is absolutely wonderful and more than fair. And I can't wait until the illustrated version comes out on paperback or hardcover even. Just
Yeah,
get a copy
whatever,
of that.
shoot for the moon. Why not?
Yeah, we should have like a raffle or something with like autograph copies when that comes out.
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
That's gonna be cool.
Oh, yeah.
And I love the idea of maps. Like one of my favorite books is the Phantom Toll Booth, and one of the reasons I love that map in the front with all the different lands and everything.
Oh, yes, I utterly adore that book. Yeah, I've got a copy that's just fallen to pieces.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I reread it like about once a year, and it's held together with tape.
Yep.
Maybe someday the 16-year-olds who are going through the pandemic right now and reading your book, and they get that on paperback, and 20 years from now they'll be like, oh yes, this is my first edition copy of Cradle of the Worm. It's held together with masking tape.
Oh, geez, that would be my dream. Yeah, if there's just one or two kids who, oh, I just love this book, and I remember the first time I read it, and it just changed my life, and I was so happy. I would love it if somebody was temporarily that excited and transported to another place by something that I made. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think adults are really going to dig it too. Like we're talking about its appropriateness for younger people, but I think adults are really going to love it too. My dad is actually super stoked to read it, but he's waiting for the audiobook version to come out because he's super into Audible and audiobooks and
oh yeah, that's why we decided to do that, because talking to some of my other friends, I realized that the only way that I was going to be able to easily give it to them was to let them listen to it, because some of them genuinely have trouble reading, like they have awful trouble with migraines or stuff like that, or they just really don't have time, but they do really love audiobooks. Like audiobooks kind of changed their life and let them finally be able to enjoy books. And I don't want to cut those people out. There's plenty of them, so.
Yeah, and we're going to be sharing at the end of this interview the first chapter of your book, because you are slowly but surely, and actually rather quickly, but you are getting those audio chapters out there and uploading them pretty much as soon as they're recorded.
Yeah, I have it on there, quote-unquote bi-weekly, but if we can get them out faster, we will. We're just going to do it as quick as we can, basically.
Yeah, and so 37 chapters, and that's going to go quick, so people will be able to listen to the entire book, and in the meantime, they can read the ebook version, and then when everything is out, people can listen to it and read it at the same time and have like you guys' voices in their ears while reading the book version like it's closed captions.
I love it.
Yeah, you mentioned that you've been working on this for 25 years, and I've known you for almost 15 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I can testify you have been working on it for at least as long as I've known you, and that's a pretty long time at this point. But it's gone through several changes, right? Like it originally had a different title, and I'm not sure what other changes happened, and if you want to share any of them, but if you do, please do.
Yeah, let's see. Well, I'm going to try to see if I can figure out a non-spoiler way to share. Well, the first title that it had was The Balance, because back when I first conceived of it, the main point that I wanted to have was an external point. I wanted it to mainly be about the world, the environment that these people occupied, and the effect of the antagonist upon the environment, and the motivation for the people largely centered around undoing the damage done by the antagonist to the environment and restoring the balance. And as I went on, and I grew up and became a mother and had to do harder jobs and things like that, and met people who had different problems and challenges, the focus kind of changed, and the focus in the novel became more about the people and how the people were changed by the antagonist, and how the people changed to be able to face the antagonist, what the people were willing to sacrifice, how the people grew, how the people adapted, how the people relied upon each other, and also examples of people who didn't do a good job of coping with the changes, the negative things done by the antagonist to their world. It's, again, I didn't intend it to be quite so apropos, but it's kind of reminiscent of how right now we are seeing how some people are really shining because of this terrible challenge that so many people are facing, and they're doing wonderful things. They're switching their business over to make protective gear, and they're making lunches for poor people and children, and they're going shopping for like all four of their grandparents who live in different houses, and they're tirelessly sewing masks and sending them out to hospitals that aren't anywhere near where they live. But we're seeing other people who aren't coping with it well, other people who are becoming more afraid or angry or narrow-minded. So it's now, again, even though I didn't mean it to be quite so topical, it's very much about the different way in which you respond to a very great challenge.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the timing is so perfect, but and that your book is so topical at this point, but I think it's something that we could all learn from and hopefully grow with the characters who learn to shine.
Yeah, I mean, I hope at the very least it can perhaps resonate and be cathartic, because it does, you know? I mean, I don't want to be trite and be like, well, you know, misery loves company, but I think you do kind of feel better when you realize that you're not the only person alone on the moon, and you're weird, and nobody's like you, and nobody's going through what you are. And then you find a friend who says, yeah, I know. I felt like that. I don't think you're weird. I think you have the right to be who you are, and I love you. So hopefully it's more that than, yeah, let's all just be miserable and scared together. It's more like, no, let's all be us together.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Interesting that it went from being about that environment and then it changed to being about people.
Yeah.
And I think that's really nice. Like, and personally, I prefer that. I like stories that are more about characters than the environments they're in.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, well, you know, I'm an artist, so I really love beautiful, stunning vistas and visuals and things, but I'll be happy to draw that for you guys. I mean, I've of course described all the different places that the people are in and what they see, but the art is going to be a counterpoint to that in the final version of the book, because I have faith that I can show you guys what I was seeing. But the book focuses more on the characters.
Well, it seems like you found your own balance then. A way
Hey,
to...
nice. Perfect. Wow,
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, a way to talk about the characters and to talk about the beautiful scenery, and now you get to show that beautiful scenery.
Yeah, see, there's a change that it's been so long that I didn't think about it, but originally I was going to do it as a comic for that reason, because I primarily make visuals. But my whole life I've always really enjoyed writing. I just don't do it as frequently as I draw. But yeah, then I figured out, well, shoot, let me make like 10 or 20 just gorgeous, elaborate paintings and not have to, make 3,000 panels, that are each not perfect, which is what I would like them to be. Because the comic that I did make, Killing of Dreams, was quite small because every panel I did want to be a painting. And, the balance / Cradle of the Worm / is a lot longer of a story than that.
Yeah.
So I kind of realized after I did The Killing of Dreams that I just couldn't do the balance as a comic, because I do really want every single picture to be perfect.
Speaking of which, if you go to Heather's website at sandpaperdaisy.com, she's got The Killing of Dreams on there, which is the comic book that she was talking about, and it is gorgeous. So check that out if you haven't. So if you are into comic books and you'd rather read a comic book, go there and check that out.
Yeah, also horror, of course.
Yep.
It's what I do.
Yep. Heather is a horror artist, and now she's a horror fantasy novelist.
Yeah.
One of your dreams for this was to get pretty much all of your family who isn't family involved in this book, yes?
Yeah, and I'm really happy to say that I've been largely successful in that endeavor. My actual family also, of course, over the space of 25 years has suggested, different little scenes or ideas or whatever. My dad named the main character, which it's not going to spoil you guys to tell the main character's name. I mean, I've got his description on the page, but his name is Corm with an M because my dad wanted to have the absolute least prestigious, least impressive name that anyone could ever have, and a corm is like an onion bulb. Like it's just like a dirty onion or crocus bulb in the ground. Like it's just the plainest, most homely little thing that you could be is just, a garden bulb. So my dad actually named the main character.
Awesome.
Yeah, And then my friends next door, I'm so psycho that I've literally moved my best friends next door to me. So my friends who now live next door are the voices on the audiobook. My friend Kim and her husband Elliot, and then me are the three voices that you all are going to be encountering on the audiobook. I'm going to be the voice of chapter 2, which you'll be hearing pretty soon. Kim will be chapters 3 and 4, and so on. We're alternating because there are basically 3 or 4 main big threads that the book follows a few different people, and each of us will be heading the clump of chapters that addresses our chosen person, and we each chose people that we identified with the most. And then I'm trying to think of who. My friends at work are getting into the act. One of them was going to teach herself to learn guitar to cheer herself up. So she's going to try to provide some guitar music eventually for an intro for it. Another friend of mine's trying to teach herself harmonica. She's going to try to provide some voices or sound effects or something. You're one of my very dear friends. And so I released it on this website, and then you're helping me tinker around with the mastering of the audio files and stuff like that, and, seeing how the edit is and all this other stuff. So, yeah, I wanted to try to involve everybody that I loved, and I pretty much managed to do it. I'm pretty darn happy about that.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
because one of the main themes of your book is friends as family. They come together and they become each other's support system and get things done and grow and thrive together.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's a big, important part of the book.
But it's also important part of life.
Big important part of the book being made, too, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. You've been working on it for so long. And you talked about, you started this book when you were still in or just out of high school, right?
I was still in, yeah. Let's see, I'm 38. Yeah, I started when I was about 12, 13 years old. So.
Oh my gosh. No, that's not 12 or 13. That's middle school. That's not high school. Unless you're some kind of super genius. Are you a super genius?
No, I'm not a super genius.
Yeah, you've been holding out on me.
But yeah, I confirmed it because, I keep my old school books because I drew all over them. So, I didn't want to throw away my drawings. So right. I went and looked back at the very first drawing, and it was back in 93 or 95 or something like that. So yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago.
Oh my goodness, yeah, just that's such a huge span of time. You've done so much. Okay, then there's middle school, there's high school, there's everything that comes after high school, meeting your husband, having your children, all of that stuff. That's just enormous. And through all of that, this book was with you and a part of you and being formed.
Yeah, and that's one reason. I mean, I'm glad it took that long for that reason, because that means that there's some of me as a child in there, and there's some of me as an uncertain young woman in there, a teenager and a young woman, and there's some of me as a woman who's just starting to become more confident and growing up. And then there's some of me as the, hard-boiled wife and mom that I am now, So since there's so many different types of people in the book, I'm glad that I've been so many different types of people while I wrote the book.
That's so wonderful. I love that. So as you were growing up, your influences must have changed a lot, but I know that some of them are probably the same. And one of the things that keeps coming up for this book, for the people who have already read it, is that it's sort of The Thing, 1982 version meets Disney's Mulan. And was that kind of what you were going for, or?
Yes, that was absolutely what I was going for. That is my favorite Disney movie, and I
Mine
suppose
too.
yeah, I mean, it probably always will be. And The Thing is my favorite movie of all time.
Ooh.
Yeah, and The Thing very definitely has well, both of them do. Mulan has a theme about somebody not being accepted as the way that they are and needing to change or die. And The Thing is about not wanting to change in a very, very bad way that will destroy everything good about you. And so it's really hard and scary to try to fall between those two choices, because when you are trying to survive and when you have to make a very, very great change in yourself in order to do so, it could be a categorically good thing, or it could destroy you, even if you physically survive. And that's another really big part of the book, is how much are you willing to change in order to survive? And in The Thing, at the very end, you don't really know. I hope it's okay if I spoil a 1982 movie for you guys, by the way. Is that okay? Am I loud, or?
It should be okay. I can put a time code on here if they want to skip the spoiler.
Okay. So at the very end of The Thing, you don't know which one happened. You don't know if Childs is the thing. You don't know if McCready is the thing. You don't know what should happen to them. You don't know if they should just die there. You don't know if they really can trust each other, and so they should try to escape and warn everyone. You don't know what they should do because you don't know who they are. And if you have made some sort of huge change in yourself to try to survive something incredibly threatening and dangerous that would be exceedingly hard to survive, and something that you could not survive on your own, you don't really know at the end of it what you've become in order to do that. So it is, that's one of the scary parts of the book, is the fear that, you've lived long enough to become the villain, basically. Because, you've heard that saying, well, you can either die a hero or live long enough to become a bit,
Yeah.
But it's kind of, that's one of the ideas that's played with in the book as well, is what did you do to win? And I guess that's also just, playing off the thing of how are you going to adapt? Are you going to adapt in a good way, or are you going to adapt in a bad way? Stuff like that.
Yeah, many years ago, you actually gave me some advice regarding adapting to things, and you were like, well, you can either expect the world to become leather and that it won't hurt your feet, or you can put on a pair of shoes.
Yeah, I want to say it's like an old Buddhist saying or something, but yeah, it's, why do we wear shoes? Because you cannot cover the world with leather and make it soft. You got to do this on your own.
Yeah.
And, and that is something that you should do, but it's also scary. You're scared of, are you going to be too hard-hearted at the end of this? Am I going to lose my soft heart? Am I going to lose my empathy? That's a scary thing.
Yeah, I thought that was just such like a, yeah, hey. This Heather gal, she's all right. We kind of discussed this earlier. It's like, I don't know what to ask you that won't lead to spoilers, because I don't want to spoil this for anyone. I want them to just go and read it or listen to it being read and experience it for themselves. So I'm not really sure what else to talk about in order to shine a bright enough spotlight on you and how awesome you are without ruining the experience for people.
Well, I think sometimes people just also ask stuff like, well, what kind of horror do you like? This is horrorfam.com. I don't think it would be remiss for you to ask general horror-related questions.
So, what kind of horror are you into, Heather?
I really love, well, that is a little bit spoiler. I'm just going to say, and if you care enough, then, if you're brave enough, then go do this. But one of my absolute favorite pieces of horror of all time that has deeply influenced me, and that includes in this book, is the poem Darkness by Lord Byron. And if you guys have never heard of this, this is one of the I mean, Lord Byron, what do you think of? You think of, oh, she walks in beauty like the night. Or you think of, oh, man, that dude liked his sister Augusta too much. Or maybe you've seen, that really cool Gabriel Byrne, Julian Sands movie that was super freaky, or whatever. Gothic, I think it was called. But he wrote this brief, incredibly beautiful, incredibly dark, creepy poem. And darkness is nothing more and nothing less than the light of the sun being extinguished and the people of the earth having to, well, they can't live through it. I mean, the spoilers, from like an 1800s poem, everybody eventually dies because the sun stopped shining. Duh. But yeah, the poem is just amazing. It's some of the best horror that I've ever read in my life or will ever read. And I mean, I'm trying to see if I can just remember a little piece of it. I had a dream that was not all a dream. The bright sun was extinguished, and the earth rolled blind and blackening in the moonless air. It's something like that. And that's one of the things that I read when I was bright-eyed little 12 or 13-year-old Heather starting on my journey. And that's one of the things that influenced and informed this book. That's one of my favorites of all time. And that I owe to my dad. He was the one who turned me onto that poem. He told me about it.
Wow. Yeah, not too many people bring up poems as their, favorite horror mediums.
I did an entire art show on that poem. I had like 20 or 30 art pieces, and then I had books. Now, I love books. I'm not a bonfire of the vanities type person, so I did literally just use textbooks that had faulty information in them. So, like, I deliberately had my friends, and I went and found, like, in the bookstores and stuff, textbooks that were actually harmful because they had incorrect scientific information in them, for example. So I spray painted them all black, and I nailed them shut, and then I nailed stanzas of the poem to these books, and then I put these black, creepy-looking books at intervals all through the entire gallery, and then the paintings and things that I made in between them. So people read the entire poem as they went through, and they looked at all the pieces of art. And in addition, because this poem was about the destruction of everything, my art was also the destruction of former pieces of my art. I deliberately destroyed and rubbed on and painted over pieces of my own original art that could not be replaced.
Oh my gosh.
In order to make the new pieces of art for this art show. So yeah, that's how much I love that poem.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Dang. So, how about movies? You like movies?
Yeah, like I said, the Thing's my all-time favorite. I mean, because it's a closed set horror movie. I mean, it's just as majestic and perfectly efficient to watch as Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, which is another absolutely amazing movie. Because Rope just takes place in one room. That's it. It's in one room. And it is perfect. So I really do like horror that is as efficient as possible, which, I'm sure you might end up when you're, going through this and editing it and stuff, you might be like, oh man, she needs to cut some of them sentences out. Because I haven't gotten there yet. I try not to be H.P. Lovecraft levels of flowery, which, by the way, I adore him. He is like one of my absolute favorites of all time. But, dude likes his adjectives. Yeah. But I prefer for horror to be not one wasted sentence or not one wasted look or expression or scene or act. I'm very, I'm all about like Chekhov's gun or whatever. By gosh, if you see the gun, then it needs to be fired later. And I don't want anything to be wasted or extra. So I tried very, very hard to have every single thing that happened in that book be significant. Everything. I don't know if I succeeded, but that was my goal.
That's very, very cool. And I was just teasing you earlier about these switching topics to movies. Like, I think that was really cool that you did that with the art show. It's hardcore, but it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, people have like all these really weird ideas about art, the Mona Lisa, which is perfectly fine, by the way. I went and saw it. It's lovely. But the Mona Lisa is this old, rotting, small picture behind about 3 inches of glass, and it has been revered and worshipped by many for a very, very long time. But even though I think the Mona Lisa is great and I'm glad that it's taught, I don't think that it matters whether or not it's hanging there behind 3 inches of glass, since we have all kinds of copies and pictures of it, and we are able to show it to people in many different ways. Which is one reason why I do digital art, because I don't care about the original at all. As long as I've managed to preserve lots of, copies of the original, and I've got them all backed up, and I've printed them out on all kinds of pieces of paper, and everybody's been able to see them, I'm happy, because the art is alive. And I never want to be so scared of losing the original piece of art and thinking that it's magical just because it was the first thing that I drew that piece of art on. So yeah, I was happy to destroy my art because I don't care about the originals. It's dumb to elevate a particular piece of wood or a particular piece of cloth. The thing that I want to elevate is the idea that I put onto it.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why, I didn't mind writing and rewriting and correcting and slashing this and slashing that out of a book over the course of 25 years, because I never want to fetishize something just because it's the first draft.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that I've loved about having a cell phone with a camera in it, because now it's like, well, this shirt or whatever doesn't fit me anymore, and I can just take a picture of it and then be like, okay, now it can go off to Goodwill and bring joy to someone else. Like, it's still perfectly good, it's still fancy pants and looks awesome, but it doesn't fit me, and I have a picture of it, I can remember it, and someone else can enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the same way about you as a person as well. I think it's great to have a record of yourself. I definitely think if people can, they should keep diaries or, do a little voice note every once in a while of how they feel and who they are then. But they're not going to be that person forever. And again, they shouldn't just fetishize that person that they were, because it's okay that they're going to grow and continue to learn things, and that will make them into a different person in the future. And it should.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like your story, you gotta adapt, and you gotta adapt in a healthy way.
Right.
So that you don't destroy yourself or destroy those around you. Well, anything else that you want to share? I mean, I want to tell everyone your links and everything, and then I'm very eager to share chapter 1 of The Cradle of the Worm.
Yeah, right now, much of what I would have planned to do this year, as I'm sure pretty much everybody wrote, much of what I would have planned to do this year is now out. And I basically had to just revert to my most basic level of existence in many ways. But what I learned whenever that happened was I was actually kind of grateful, although I'm really not happy about all the terrible things that have happened to people, but I'm really grateful that I'm kind of stuck just being Heather for a while. Not going to go, having to go somewhere, not having to do something specific, but because it's kind of like being reminded that it's okay for me to exist. It's okay for me to enjoy being in my house. It's okay for me to just enjoy being next to my children and listening to them prattle on about whatever. It's okay for me to just exist and be here and live my own life and not be currently trying to help someone else or make someone else feel important. Like I deserve to exist. Basically, that's what this has taught me. Now, whenever I, was just at my most basic level of existence and was just kind of enjoying that, I found that I still wanted to help people. So I did. But it felt so great to know that it was just really okay for me to be me for a while and not be trying to help anyone else particularly achieve any particular goal, which is what usually I'm doing to some extent when I'm at an art show or when I'm at my job or whatever. You're ultimately, working with somebody else on trying to help them out too in a business way, if you're at an art show or something like that. So honestly, that's kind of what I'd like to keep doing for a little while as I, work on the illustrations for this book and get other things done that I've wanted to do for a very, very long time. But I want to just remember that I am myself, and it's really okay to just be me and find out what I want to do. because I haven't really thought about what I want to do for a while I've been busy, trying to take care of other folks.
I think that's so true for so many people. I know that's true for me. And same for pretty much everyone who created horrorfam.com. My husband Frank, my friend Christy, you, me, we all had that kind of, we were always helping other people, and then now that the world is stopped and we're just kind of stuck being ourselves, it's kind of like, well, what do we do now?
Yeah, it's beautiful and it's exciting and it's intimidating. It's like, yes, it's finally okay for you to just exist. So who are you really? And what do you really want? This is it. This is your time. And it's like, oh, wow. Oh, this is my chance. Oh, shoot. Okay. Oh, man. Oh, gee, I wasn't ready. Oh, But,
yeah.
But this is it. I know it's super depressing and scary and weird, but it's also our time.
Yeah, and I hope that people listening to this kind of realize that it's their time, and this is it. It's okay. Be you. Do the things that you want to do. It's okay.
Yeah.
The world has given you permission. So weird. It's like, yeah, like people who are going to be reading your book, it's going to be like, yeah, hey, back in the day before, work and all the things that I usually do, didn't I used to like to read?
Oh my gosh. I feel that so hard. Yeah. Right before it hit the fan, we could tell it was about to hit the fan. And me and my dad went to a used book warehouse. And we both just got a big, huge stack of books. Because it was that magical couple of days, when we were pretty darn sure we were just about to be told to shelter in place. Like, we were pretty sure it was coming,
Yeah.
But, like, we still were free for, like, a couple more days. So, yeah, we went and we just got a big old huge stack of books. And I found out who I was because I wanted to read 1970s sci-fi schlock. That was what I wanted to read. That was Heather Landry.
There you go.
And I felt so good because I wasn't trying to read some kind of, I didn't get like all 80 volumes of Remembrance of Things Past, or whatever, to prove myself. I just got what I wanted.
Yeah, there you go. And you didn't have to get like, YouTube for Dummies or like, like so many of the books that I've had to read the past, few years, it's all, nonfiction and like how to do certain things for aspects of business. And it's just like, no, now I can just read something purely for the enjoyment of it. Like, yeah. I can sit down and read Cradle of the Worm and get involved in a horror fantasy adventure epic where,
Oh, yeah, I feel it. Yeah, I mean, it's sad, but like in the past 10 years or so, a few of the happiest days of my life in the past 10 years or so have been when I was really darn sick. But like so sick that I had to be isolated in my bedroom, because like I didn't want my kids and my husband to get, whatever I had, like stomach flu or something like that. And, obviously that's awful, but that was the only time that I could lay there in bed for 20 hours with a stack of books at my elbow whenever I wasn't busy, dealing with being sick, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But aside from that was some of the happiest days that I've had in the last 10 years because I was just allowed to exist in my room for 20 hours and just read. So yeah, this is kind of like an extended version of that, but, thank God, knock wood, I'm not like horribly ill during that time. I'm just here. But yeah, that's how darn busy and overbooked we've all been, woman. I mean, you feel me?
I feel you, yes. Oh, God, yeah. I think every cell of me feels that.
Yeah, and, I chose to do everything that I did, and I've loved it all. But, boy, howdy, did I not have a whole bunch of time for me.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm super stoked that you finished your novel and that we get to share it with everyone. And people have already seen your wonderful art on horrorfam.com. You did our banner, you did our mascots, you've done pretty much anything that we needed artwork for. So even people listening to this podcast right now, if you look at our podcast logo, that was drawn by Heather.
I love Vance. Vance are good.
So go to horrorfam.com/freebies or just go to horrorfam.com and click on the free stuff tab. Heather's novel is there, along with the coloring book pages she made. So if you want to do some adult coloring while you're listening to the novel or reading the novel, you can do that. Just relax, zen out, color with crayons or coloring
Heck, you
colored
can
pencils.
use nail polish if you got it. I've had to do that before.
Oh, I've done that before too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a fan on, by all means.
Yeah, it stinks, but
Yeah.
it turns out real pretty.
Yeah.
And then Heather's own website, Sandpaperdaisy.com. You can get the Killing of Dreams comic on there, and you can see all her other cool horror art. And, well, when the lockdown is over, and you might be able to catch Heather at a festival or an art show, or
Yeah, one day we'll be, back out there, and I'll be chugging away, happy as a clam, I'm sure. I'll probably be like, oh man, all that stuff about, having time was just so boring. I'm so glad to be back out there. I don't know. I think I'm going to enjoy myself, though, while I'm stuck, and then I think I'm going to enjoy myself while I'm out. That's my goal, anyway.
Yeah, let's all work on enjoying ourselves more.
Definitely.
And Heather is on Twitter and Instagram, both handles at Sandpaperdaisy. So you can follow her on there and engage in conversations with her and tag her in things. If you do those coloring book pages, make sure that you tag Heather so she can see them too. We've both been enjoying the photos that people have been sending in of their renditions of our mascots. It's been really,
oh yeah,
really
I
fun.
love them. They're so great. Joan's still my favorite.
And gosh, is it time? Should we share chapter 1?
Let's do it.
Okay. Is there anything that you want to say before we dive into that, or any prep needed? I know. How do you say your friend Elliot's name? Elliot was the reader for chapter 1.
Yeah, Elliot Cantu.
Cantu. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there will be a link somewhere if you need his lovely voice for your efforts. We got his email down there somewhere. I know I've got it on the bottom of the novel page, for example.
And I'll include it for this as well. So, okay, I guess without further ado, here's chapter 1 of The Cradle of the Worm by Heather Landry.
This one's for you guys.
Chapter 1, Resurrection Men. The grass leading down into the valley looked blue this morning. In the distance, the sun was just beginning to show over the mountains. As its rays gradually crept into the valley, 2 figures made their way down the path to the village. They didn't speak as they walked, although occasionally their uneven gait would cause them to knock into each other. Their ragged garments flapped in the sharp morning wind. One raised a gloved hand to clutch its broad-brimmed hat. The village, called Chiron, was little more than a few huts nestled together in the valley. The people here were shepherds and farmers, traveling to the nearest market town for anything the forest and fields could not provide. The settlement of less than 50 souls did not boast a church or school, the villagers relying instead on the teachings of their elders. There was a local well and a crude meeting house for important matters. This was to be Chiron's last day as a village. As the strangers made their slow descent into the valley, lurching along with no regard for the steepness of the terrain, the village slowly stirred to life. An old woman was already busy milking while her old man stalked through the outbuildings, clearly agitated. Finally, with an air of resignation, he turned to her. "Well, where is he then?" The woman did not lift her head from the flank of her cow. "Up in the woods. He said he had to gather flowers." "Flowers?" The man's name was Green. His voice was incredulous. Now the woman known to the village as Granny looked up. "He said he needed 1 flower for everyone in the village." She heaved a sigh and shook her head in a way that was habitual to her when she was thinking of corn. "Maybe we should have let him ripe a little longer," she joked. Green sighed. "He gets these notions." Granny stood up and gripped the bucket, feeling her spine crackle as she did so. It was not an unpleasant feeling, and she stretched a little. "Yes, and he forgets his promises. He said he'd help you chop the kindling, and now off he goes." Whatever her husband was about to say in answer to this was abruptly cut off by the sound of running feet. The 2 old people turned to face the source of the noise, a young man of about 17 or 18. "Jan!" The old man's face showed joy as he regarded his visitor. They had only recently taken him in, but Jan was already a great comfort to Green in his old age. He was a strong boy, and moreover, he was not in the habit of shirking his duties to go off on wild jaunts whenever the mood took him. Green noted with approval that the sickle in Jan's belt already had grass clinging to it. Jan ran a hand through hair like straw and nodded to them distractedly, looking around. He was still out of breath. Granny spoke up warily. "He's not here if you're looking for Corm." The boy grimaced. "Bad luck. Rosie's finally dropped her calf." "He's gone up to the mountain," the old woman shrugged. "He'll come back when his stomach tells him to, I expect." "I don't know what will become of that child when Papa and I are gone. I really don't." "I shall take care of him, of course." Jan smiled. The smile was infectious, and the old people found themselves sharing it. Their thoughts were interrupted by the harsh croaking of a bird. Most people had risen by this time, and a few of them glanced toward the center of the settlement, where a number of crows were beginning to cluster. Gossip about poor fishing and a recent lack of rabbits died down as more of them noticed the birds. "Corbies?" breathed Jan. "But why so many? There's nothing for them here." Green furrowed his brow, but then his eyes widened. 2 figures had appeared in the square. They wore broad hats and gloves, with their faces buried underneath thick scarves and their voluminous coats closely buttoned in spite of the growing warmth of the morning. They swayed drunkenly up to the carrion crows, forcing more than one of the birds to scuttle ahead of the stranger's unmindful feet. The 2 came to a dead stop in the middle of the square and stonily regarded the small crowd who had by now gathered to stare at them. The pragmatic people of the village had no great regard for beggars or drunkards, but no one challenged the strange men. No one spoke at all. Something white showed where the taller one's sleeve ended well above the rim of a glove. It was bone. Green's tongue finally loosened. "God help us. Resurrection men!" Granny choked, and one of the women nearby screamed. Several people dropped to their knees to plead for their lives. Jan tried to grab Granny and Green and drag them back into the nearest outbuilding, but time itself seemed to fight him. He felt like he was wading through mud. The 2 strangers had not moved. "This place?" the shorter one rasped. Its voice was like worms twisting in a rotting log. The taller one nodded, the scarf slipping down from its chin to reveal a bare jawbone, missing several teeth. They opened their coats. Up on the mountainside, a boy was gathering flowers. He was too far away to hear the noises in the valley. His expression did not change as he slowly counted the flowers again and again. This was typical of him, for he rarely smiled or frowned or made any kind of face. This was Corm, who had been taken to Granny Green 17 years ago after he was found near the woods, whimpering and half buried in mud. She and her old man had accepted his care, and the village had grown used to his peculiarities over the years. Granny made him shirts from old sacks and quilts, and Green did his best to teach the boy useful things, some of which stuck and some which didn't. Corm felt nothing but love and gratitude for them, locked behind his passive face. Down in the valley, the village was dying. The first to die saw what looked like a blurred gray cloud erupt from the ribs of the 2 strangers before they went down under its tendrils. Those who lived a few seconds longer were able to see smaller masses squirming within the great mass, slick, smooth things which, though soft and toothless, ate a man to bone in seconds. People were devoured as they ran or as they huddled paralyzed with fear. Granny Green and her man died before their bodies fell to the dust of the outbuilding floor. Rosie's calf was consumed a scant hour after it had been born. The village was emptied of life in minutes. When silence returned to the village, the 2 strangers looked at each other over the mass of busy crows. "Will he use any?" asked the smaller one, who called itself Kola. "Who knows?" Molt, the taller one, seemed to have more difficulty speaking. "Why this place?"
Why does he do anything?
Both of them laughed, a grinding, rattling sound that was more unwholesome than the sly, feasting sounds of the birds. Cola clicked its jaw, and the two braced themselves as the viscous mass that had eaten a village slid up into them again. Most of the hapless crows came with it.
Heavy,
Cola remarked.
No more talk.
Molt straightened up and drew its coat shut. Together they departed the way they had come. Corm came down from the mountain about midday. Usually at noontime there would be smoke coming from one or more of the huts clustered there, but he saw none. Granny was not calling him to lunch. Papa and Jan and the other men were not working in the fields or talking in the streets. By now, even most of the surviving crows were gone. He saw no one at all. The only thing he noticed as he approached the settlement was that there seemed to be rubbish strewn everywhere. He kept careful hold of his flowers as he picked his way down the mountain. The village had an overwhelming smell that Corm did not like. It was a blood smell, but it was something more than that. There hung over the valley a stench of something unnatural. He had never encountered anything like it, and he had to press his palm against his mouth to keep from being sick. As he looked down at the ground, dizzy from the smell, he saw what he had taken to be trash earlier. Corm's expression did not change. He slowly lifted his head to take in the whole settlement, his eyes refocusing to admit the new truth they saw. Everyone was dead, the meat eaten from them. Some were in bones, some still had faces. He recognized many of them only by their clothing. A filthy gray film clung to all of them. Silently, Corm broke into a run, looking to the right and left, darting in and out of houses. He clutched the flowers tighter to his chest as he came to the end of his grim inventory. No one had made it. Except he dropped to his knees beside Granny and Papa. Jan's sickle lay across them like a guardian. With one hand, Corm shifted their bones, feeling their cold guts under his palm as he cocked his head and frowned with real thought. He believed that there were only 2 corpses here. He had not seen Jan anywhere else. Jan was not here. He was gone. Corm set down his flowers. There was no question as to what needed to be done. He found one of Green's spades, and for the rest of the day and into the night he dug shallow holes. One by one, he tipped each villager into a grave and covered them loosely with earth. He thought about them through the tedious and repetitive work. Corm had been teased for his ways. People lost patience teaching him, sometimes even Granny and Papa. Jan had been the only one who never seemed to mind. But as he studied each dead face, it was not these things Corm thought of. He thought of being taken fishing and given the coveted job of brushing Rosie's coat. He thought of Granny's bedtime stories and the little owl Jan's father had whittled him once. No one had asked for him, yet all had taken care of him. Corm knew this with an acute hidden perception. He mourned them deeply, even if he did not weep. The buck moon was high in the sky before he was done. He gathered the flowers in his arms once more and put 1 flower on each grave. 1 flower for every person in the village. When he had finished, there was 1 left. Jan's sickle lay where Corm had left it, reflecting the moon. He picked it up and put it in his belt, thinking that when he found Jan, he'd give it back to him. Then he walked out of the village with nothing but the clothes on his back. The gray creatures had left him no food and no indication of what direction he should go. He knew only that he had to go after Jan. It was the first time he had ever left the valley.